The dust of FOB Nightingale tasted of rust and regret. It clung to the back of the throat, a fine, gritty film that water never quite washed away. Lieutenant Maya Sorensen felt it settle on her skin as she stepped out of the CH-47, the twin rotors beating a violent retreat against the oppressive Kandahari heat. The air was a physical weight, thick and shimmering above the sun-baked gravel of the landing zone. Around her, a dozen Green Berets from ODA 914 moved with the practiced economy of men long accustomed to this particular brand of hell. They hefted their gear, their jokes rough and clipped, their camaraderie a fortress she stood outside of. No one offered her a hand. No one met her gaze for more than a fleeting, dismissive second. She was an attachment, a last-minute addition to their reconnaissance mission, and an unwelcome one at that. Her presence was an anomaly, a disruption to their tightly wound ecosystem. She swung her own pack onto her shoulders, the 60-pound weight settling with familiar comfort. She ignored the sideways glances, the low murmurs that died as she passed. She had learned long ago that the first battle was always fought in silence, against the weight of perception. The command tent smelled of stale coffee, sweat, and ozone from the humming banks of electronics. Colonel Madsen looked up from a holographic map table, his face a mask of weary impatience. He was a man carved from granite and protocol, his eyes holding the flat, hard look of a career officer who had seen too much to be impressed by anything. He gestured vaguely toward a seat she didn't take. "Lieutenant Sorensen," he said, the title a formality devoid of respect. "Your file is thin." She remained standing, her posture relaxed but rooted. "It's redacted, sir." A grunt from the corner of the tent drew her attention. Sergeant First Class Rex Thorne leaned against a support pole, his arms crossed over a chest as broad as a barrel. His jaw was tight, a muscle twitching near his ear. He was the team's senior NCO, a man whose reputation for battlefield ferocity was matched only by his reputation for corrosive disdain for anyone outside his immediate circle. Especially, it seemed, her. "Redacted," Thorne scoffed, the word dripping with contempt. "Means she's a POG from some intel desk who pulled strings to get a CIB. We're going outside the wire, Colonel. This isn't a field trip for the Pentagon's diversity program." Madsen didn't reprimand him. He let the insubordination hang in the air, a tacit endorsement. "Your operational experience is listed as classified. That doesn't help me, Lieutenant. My men's lives depend on every member of this team being a known quantity. You are an unknown. I'm here to provide overwatch and signals intelligence support, Colonel," Maya said, her voice even, betraying no reaction to the hostility. "My skill set is suited to the mission parameters." "Your skill set?" Thorne pushed off the pole and took a step forward, his shadow falling over her. He was a head taller, a wall of muscle and aggression. "Let me tell you what the mission parameters are, Lieutenant. We move fast, we hit hard, and we don't carry dead weight. Can you keep up? Can you handle yourself when the shooting starts? Or are you going to freeze up and get one of my guys killed?" Maya met his stare. His eyes were pale blue, cold and flat as glacial ice. She saw the challenge there, the raw, territorial anger. She didn't flinch. "I'll manage." "That's not good enough," Thorne snarled, his voice dropping to a low, menacing growl. He stepped closer still, invading her personal space, forcing her to crane her neck to look up at him. "Out there, in the gray, accidents happen. People who can't pull their weight, they get left behind. You understand what I'm saying?" It was a direct threat, ugly and unambiguous. In the charged silence of the tent, the hum of the servers sounded like a nest of hornets. Colonel Madsen watched, his expression unreadable, letting his NCO test the new arrival. Master Sergeant Diaz, the team's second-in-command, shifted his weight uncomfortably by the map table but said nothing. The younger soldiers, Chun and Rodriguez, watched with wide, expectant eyes. Maya didn't raise her voice. She didn't square her shoulders or ball her fists. She simply held his gaze, her own eyes dark and calm. There was a stillness about her, a complete lack of fear or anger, that seemed to unnerve him more than any shouted retort could have. The air crackled with a tension that had nothing to do with the mission. "I understand," she said, her voice quiet but carrying the resonant finality of a closing steel door. "Perfectly." She held his gaze for 3 more seconds, a silent eternity, before turning back to the colonel. "When do we brief, sir?" The dismissal was absolute. She had not only heard his threat, she had accepted it and moved on, as if it were a minor inconvenience, a piece of lint to be brushed from a uniform. A flicker of something, confusion, maybe even a sliver of doubt, crossed Thorne's face before it hardened again into a mask of contempt. He grunted and turned away, spitting a stream of tobacco juice into an empty can. Colonel Madsen finally spoke, a sharp edge to his voice. "Briefing is at 1800. Find a rack, stow your gear. Don't be late." He turned back to his map, the audience over. As Maya walked out of the tent, the oppressive heat felt less suffocating than the cold hostility she left behind. She found an empty cot at the far end of the barracks tent, away from the tight cluster of ODA 914. They ignored her, their conversation a low buzz of inside jokes and shared history. She methodically unpacked her kit. Her rifle, a custom-built 12 Malawian Quach's special-purpose rifle, was her first priority. She broke it down on her poncho liner, the parts clicking together with practiced familiarity. The movements were a meditation, a ritual of focus. She checked the optics, the trigger assembly, the suppressor threads. Every piece was clean, perfectly maintained. Her hands moved with an efficiency that was almost hypnotic. Private Chen, a young soldier with curious eyes, watched her from a few cots away. He saw not just a soldier cleaning her weapon, but an artist at her craft. The other men paid her no mind, their laughter and loud talk a deliberate wall of exclusion. Later, in the mess hall, she ate alone. The long table where the team sat was full, but the space around her was a vacuum. She ate slowly, methodically, her senses taking in everything around her. The clatter of trays, the smell of burnt coffee, the subtle shifts in posture and tone. Thorne held court, his voice booming, telling a story about a firefight in the Pesh Valley. His men laughed on cue. He glanced over at her once, a smirk playing on his lips, before turning back to his audience. He was marking his territory, reinforcing the pack hierarchy. She was the Omega, the outsider to be shunned until she was driven out. She finished her meal, cleaned her tray, and walked out into the gathering dusk. The sky was a bruised purple, the mountains black daggers against the horizon. The weight of Thorne's threat was a cold stone in her gut, but it was a familiar weight. She had carried it in different forms, in different places for a long time. It didn't scare her, it focused her. The mission was to infiltrate a valley controlled by an insurgent commander known as the Ghost. They were to observe, report, and if the opportunity arose, capture or eliminate him. High risk, high reward. Perfect place for an accident. Perfect place to get left behind. Maya checked the wind, her eyes scanning the perimeter fence. The mission hadn't even started, but the fight for survival was already underway. The briefing room was colder than the tent, the air conditioning fighting a losing battle against the 20 bodies crammed inside. The holographic map in the center of the room showed a jagged spine of mountains, a topographical nightmare of ridges and ravines. This was the Ghost Sanctuary. Colonel Madsen stood at the head of the table, his pointer tracing a red line through the hostile terrain. "The infiltration window is narrow," he said, his voice a low monotone. 0200 hours. 2 Chinooks will take you to an LZ here. He tapped a spot marked LZ Vulture. 5 clicks from the primary observation point, OP Griffin. You move on foot, establish the OP, and begin surveillance. Sorensen, you're on Overwatch. You'll set up a hide 1,000 meters east of the main team, providing security and long-range comms relay. Thorne leaned forward, his knuckles white on the table. "Sir, with respect, that splits our force. We're stronger together. Putting the lieutenant out there alone, it's a liability. If she gets into trouble, we have to divert to save her. If she gets compromised, she gives away our position." Madsen's eyes flickered to Maya. Lieutenant? Your thoughts? A solo hide provides better security through obscurity, Maya stated calmly. A single observer has a smaller signature, and the position gives me a commanding field of fire over the team's eastern flank, their most likely avenue of approach. It's a sound tactical decision. Her response was textbook, logical, and devoid of emotion. It offered no purchase for Thorne's aggression. He sneered. Textbook. This isn't a classroom. That valley will chew up and spit out anyone who thinks a textbook is going to save them. Sergeant Thorne is our subject matter expert on this terrain, Matson said, a subtle tilt of his head acknowledging the NCO's dominance. But the plan stands. Your position is isolated, Lieutenant. Your primary responsibility is observation. Do not engage unless you or the team are directly compromised. Is that clear? Crystal, sir, she replied. Thorne sat back, a smug look on his face. He had made his point. She was being sidelined, pushed out to the fringes where she could do the least damage. In his eyes, he had already won. The rest of the team took their cue from him. Their expressions ranged from indifference to thinly veiled contempt. Master Sergeant Diaz, a quiet, watchful man with salt and pepper hair, was the only one who seemed to reserve judgment, his gaze analytical as he studied her. The next few hours were a blur of final preparations. Maya drew her mission-specific gear from the quartermaster. Extra batteries for the N/PRC-117G, thermal optics, and several belts of 762mm match-grade ammunition. Each item was inspected with meticulous care. As she was securing a satellite data transceiver into her pack, Thorne approached her, his boots crunching on the gravel. "Let me see your rifle," he demanded, not asked. She didn't hesitate, handing the 12 Malawian kwachas to him butt first. He took it, the weapon looking almost like a toy in his massive hands. He worked the bolt, checked the chamber, and squinted through the Schmidt and Bender scope. His movements were rough, disrespectful. "Fancy scope," he grunted, tapping the glass with a thick finger. "Doesn't mean you can shoot." He handed it back to her carelessly. "Remember what I said. Don't be a hero. Stay quiet, stay hidden. If you hear shooting, you call it in and you wait for us. You do not fire. You do nothing but be a good little radio operator. We'll handle the real work." It was a direct order, a usurpation of the colonel's authority, delivered with the explicit intent to humiliate. He was daring her to challenge him. Maya took her rifle, her fingers wrapping around the familiar grip. She ran a quick function check, her movements fluid and sure, erasing his clumsy handling. She looked at him, her face impassive. "Understood, Sergeant." Her compliance seemed to deflate him. He had wanted a fight, an argument, a reason to escalate. Her calm acceptance gave him nothing. He grunted again, a sound of frustration, and stalked off to join his men, who were clustered around a Humvee, laughing and sharpening knives. The flight to LZ Vulture was a bone-jarring ride through turbulent night air. The cavernous interior of the Chinook was dark, illuminated only by the faint red glow of the cabin lights. The men of ODA 914 were a silent, grim-faced unit now, the pre-mission banter replaced by a focused intensity. Maya sat apart, a solitary figure near the rear ramp. She ran through her mission sequence in her head. Ingress, movement to the hide, establishing comms, observation cycle, exfil triggers. The steps were a familiar litany, a calming mantra against the chaos to come. The ramp lowered into a maelstrom of dust and rotor wash. The team disembarked with practiced speed, melting into the shadows at the edge of the landing zone. Maya was the last one off. As she moved to follow, Thorne put a hand on her chest, stopping her. "We're heading west," he said, his voice a low rasp under the noise of the departing helicopter. "Your position is that way," he pointed east, toward a jagged silhouette of rock that looked no different from any other. "Don't get lost." He didn't wait for a reply. He and his team disappeared into the darkness, leaving her utterly alone. The sound of the Chinook faded, replaced by the chirping of insects and the whisper of the wind through the sparse desert scrub. The silence was immense, absolute. She stood for a long moment, letting her eyes adjust, letting the rhythms of the night settle around her. She was isolated, cut off exactly as Thorn wanted. A liability pushed to the fringe. She checked her compass, adjusted the straps on her pack, and began her solitary trek east, a ghost moving through a landscape of ghosts. The weight on her back felt right. The cold steel of her rifle was a comfort. She was exactly where she needed to be. The terrain was brutal, a treacherous maze of loose shale and thorny bushes that tore at her uniform. Every step was a calculation of balance and silence. For 3 hours, she moved with a slow, deliberate pace that ate up the ground without wasting energy. She didn't use a light, relying on the faint starlight and her own night vision. Her movements were fluid, economical, more like a predator's than a soldier's. She flowed over the landscape, her silhouette kept low, using every dip and shadow for concealment. She found the spot designated on the map, a small rock outcropping overlooking a sweeping wadi that led directly toward the team's primary OP. But it was too exposed. The map was a two-dimensional lie in a three-dimensional world. 100 meters higher, up a steep, almost sheer rock face, was a narrow fissure, a sniper's dream. It offered superior observation, a natural funnel for a firing lane, and was nearly invisible from below. Getting there would be a dangerous, unassisted climb in the dark. A textbook soldier would have stuck to the plan, used the designated spot. Maya wasn't a textbook soldier. She cached the heavier parts of her pack at the base of the cliff and began to climb. Her fingers found small, sure holds in the rock. Her boots, scraped and silent, found purchase on ledges no wider than a coin. It was a slow, agonizing ascent, her muscles screaming with the strain. The rifle, slung tight across her back, felt like an anchor trying to pull her into the abyss. But she moved with a patient, unyielding strength. This was her element. The solitude, the risk, the demanding precision of the task. At the top, she slid into the fissure, a narrow crack just wide enough for one person and a rifle. It was perfect, a natural hide, cool and dark. From here, she could see everything. The valley floor, the approach to OP Griffin, and the network of goat trails that crisscrossed the mountainside. She set up her equipment with the same methodical silence. The satellite antenna, the spotting scope, the rifle on its bipod. She laid out her datapad, her range card, and a single canteen of water. Then she became part of the rock. She slowed her breathing, stilled her body, and began to watch. The sun rose, painting the valley in harsh shades of ochre and brown. Through her scope, she could see the main team digging into their position at OP Griffin. They were good, efficient, but they were a team of 10 men. They left a sign, however faint. She, on the other hand, was invisible. For hours, nothing moved but the heat haze and the occasional lizard skittering across a rock. She scanned, catalogued, and waited. Her patience was absolute, a deep well of stillness she had cultivated over years of practice. At 1,400 hours, her radio crackled with a low hiss. It was Diaz. "Nix, this is Griffin. Anything on your scope?" The use of a call sign she hadn't provided sent a small, cold signal up her spine. They had been testing her. "Griffin, this is Overwatch," she replied, sticking to her designated call sign. "Negative contact. Valley is quiet. Copy that, Overwatch. Stay sharp." The transmission ended. Nix, where had they gotten that? It wasn't in her official file. It was a ghost from a different life, a name whispered in places like this, but by a different kind of soldier. She pushed the thought aside. Focus on the mission. The first sign of trouble was subtle. A flicker of movement on a distant ridge. Not an animal. Through her 25 power scope, she saw it clearly. A man with a rifle using a spotting scope of his own. He wasn't looking at her. He was looking directly at OP Griffin. Then she saw another. And another. Coordinated observation team. They had been watched from the moment they arrived. The ghost wasn't just hiding in this valley. He owned it. "Griffin, this is Overwatch," she whispered into her mic. "I have eyes on 3 individuals, Ridge 34-9er, observing your position. Recommend immediate withdrawal or reinforcement. You've been compromised. Thorne's voice cut in, sharp and angry. Negative overwatch. We see nothing. Hold your traffic unless you have positive ID of hostile intent. They are armed and they are scouting you, she insisted, her voice still a low, controlled whisper. This is a classic L ambush shaping operation. They're fixing you in place for a larger element. I've been doing this since before you were born, Lieutenant, Thorne shot back. I know an ambush when I see one. Stand down. That's an order. The line went dead. Maya felt a cold dread settle in her stomach. Thorne's pride was going to get them all killed. She watched as the scouts on the ridge disappeared, melting back into the rocks. They had seen enough. The trap was set. She had a choice. Obey a fatally flawed order, or prepare for the storm she knew was coming. She began her preparations. She recalculated firing solutions for every likely enemy position. She laid out 3 extra magazines, placing them where her hand could find them without looking. She took a single, long sip of water, and she waited. The attack came 30 minutes later, with the synchronized violence of a lightning strike. It didn't come from the east, as she had predicted, but from 3 directions at once. RPGs slammed into the rocks around OP Griffin, the explosions echoing like monstrous thunder through the valley. Heavy machine gun fire opened up from the ridges to the north and west, a torrent of lead that pinned the team down instantly. The scouts she had seen were just the bait. The real assault force, at least 40 strong, had been waiting. Contact! Contact! Diaz's voice screamed over the radio, strained and full of static. We're taking heavy fire from all sides. Griffin is compromised. We are pinned. The radio chatter devolved into a cacophony of shouts, explosions, and the brutal, rhythmic hammering of machine guns. Maya watched through her scope, her heart a cold, steady drum. She saw muzzle flashes everywhere. The team was caught in a perfect kill box. Thorne's arrogance had led them straight into the butcher's yard. A 3rd machine gun nest opened up, this one on the eastern ridge, cutting off their only viable retreat path. This was her sector, her responsibility. Thorne's order to stand down was now irrelevant, nullified by the catastrophic reality of the situation. Her mission parameters were clear. Do not engage unless the team is compromised. They were not just compromised. They were being systematically dismantled. Her mind went quiet. The noise, the fear, the anger at Thorne, it all faded away into a single point of focus. The crosshairs of her scope. She settled the rifle into the pocket of her shoulder, her cheek finding the cold, familiar weld of the stock. Her breathing slowed, each exhale a measured release. The world narrowed to the 12-inch circle of her lens. Her first target was the eastern machine gun. It was 980 meters away, a difficult shot in the shifting wind. She watched the stream of tracers, calculated the lead, and held her breath. The gunner was a large man, confident in his position. Maya adjusted for windage, her fingers moving the turret with surgical precision. 1 click. 2. She let half a breath out, the reticle settling just to the left of his head. The 12 Malawian quatches bucked against her shoulder, a sharp crack that was instantly swallowed by the larger din of the battle. For a fraction of a second, she lost the sight picture. When it returned, the stream of tracers from the machine gun had stopped. The gunner was gone, replaced by a red smear on the rock behind him. His assistant stared in confusion for a moment before Maya's second round took him through the chest. The gun fell silent. What was that? Diaz yelled over the radio. East flank MG is down. Who did that? Overwatch is engaging, Maya said, her voice a flat monotone. She was already scanning for her next target. Her movements were brutally efficient. Choir, range, adjust, breathe, fire. A pair of RPG gunners were preparing to fire on the team's position from the northern ridge. They were 850 meters out. The first round hit the lead man in the center of his mass, pitching him backward. The second caught his partner as he tried to scramble for cover. 2 threats neutralized in under 10 seconds. Down at OP Griffin, the change was immediate. The pressure from the east was gone, giving them a sliver of breathing room. "Holy shit," she heard Chun mutter over the open comm. "Where are those shots coming from?" Thorne's voice, when it came, was laced with disbelief. "Sorensen? What the hell are you doing? I told you to stand down." "Your team was being annihilated, Sergeant," she replied, her eye never leaving the scope. "I'm providing suppressive fire." She found a new target. An enemy commander directing fighters from behind a rock. He was pointing, shouting orders. A difficult, partially obscured target at 1,100 meters. She took a moment watching his rhythm. He would lean out to shout, then duck back. She timed it. As he leaned out again, she fired. His head snapped back and he collapsed out of sight. The fighters around him faltered, their assault losing its coordination. She was a machine, a dealer of methodical, long-distance death. For 20 minutes, she broke the back of the ambush. Every time a new threat emerged, a machine gun, a mortar team, a squad leader, a single, impossibly accurate shot would ring out from the invisible fissure in the rocks, and the threat would vanish. She wasn't just shooting. She was conducting a symphony of violence, identifying and eliminating the key nodes of the enemy's command and control and heavy weapons. She forced them to keep their heads down, disrupting their rhythm, giving ODA 914 the space they needed to fight back. The insurgents, unnerved by the ghost who was picking them apart from a kilometer away, began to fall back. Their disciplined assault dissolved into a panicked retreat. "They're breaking," Diaz shouted. "They're running. Keep firing." Maya didn't need the encouragement. She transitioned from targeting leaders to targeting escape routes, her shots pinning down the retreating fighters, making them pay for every foot of ground they gave up. Her barrel was hot, the smell of burnt cordite sharp in her small hide. She had fired 32 rounds. She had 32 confirmed kills. The valley fell silent again. The only sounds the ringing in her ears and the panicked, triumphant shouts of ODA 914 on the radio. "Griffin, this is Overwatch," she said, her voice still impossibly calm. "Hostiles have withdrawn. I count at least 20 Kia in my sector. Recommend you consolidate and prepare for a secondary attack. What is your status?" There was a long pause. Then, a voice she didn't recognize came over the command channel, overriding their local frequency. It was sharp, urgent, and filled with authority. "This is Task Force Command. We've been monitoring. Who is callsign Overwatch? Identify yourself immediately." Colonel Madsen's voice cut in from the FOB. "Command, this is Nightingale. Overwatch is Lieutenant Maya Sorensen, an attachment for this OP. Madsen, what the hell is going on?" The voice from command demanded. "We just saw a masterclass in long-range engagement that saved your entire team. Who is this lieutenant?" Before Madsen could answer, Diaz spoke, his voice filled with a dawning, breathless awe. "Sir, at the briefing, I saw her file for a second. The unredacted version, on the colonel's screen. Her last assignment. It said DevGru. Silence on the net. DevGru. The Naval Special Warfare Development Group. SEAL Team 6. The elite of the elite." The name hung in the air. Dong, and suddenly, everything made sense. The impossible shooting. The preternatural calm. The callsign someone had dredged up from a deep access file. "Command," Diaz said, his voice barely a whisper. "Check the JSOC registry. Callsign. Nix." Another silence, this one longer, heavier. Nix was a legend. A ghost story whispered by operators in hushed tones. A sniper credited with some of the most difficult and classified kills of the war. A Tier 1 operator who supposedly didn't even exist. The voice from Task Force Command came back. Its tone completely changed. It was no longer demanding. It was steeped in profound respect. "Nix. Confirmed. We have you. Maintain your position. A quick reaction force is en route to your location. Nightingale, get your men ready for exfil." On the team's local channel, there was only stunned silence. The men of ODA 914 looked up from their bloody, battered positions toward the eastern ridge, toward the invisible spot where their savior hid. They couldn't see her, but they could feel her presence. A guardian angel with a 300 Winchester Magnum. The most profound silence came from Sergeant Rex Thorne. He sat behind a rock, his rifle across his lap, his face pale with shock. He had threatened her. He had called her dead weight. He had ordered her to stand down while a ghost, a living legend of special operations, was waiting to save their lives. The shame was a physical blow, heavier than any enemy round. He keyed his mic, his hand trembling slightly. "Sorensen," he croaked, his voice rough. "Thorne. He couldn't find the words. What could he say? "Sorry, I almost got us all killed? Thank you for not letting my stupidity be our epitaph." Maya's voice came back, as calm and even as ever, cutting through his pathetic attempt at an apology. "Consolidate your casualties and secure your perimeter, Sergeant. The fight isn't over yet." It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't condemnation. It was a simple, professional statement of fact. A command from someone who was now inarguably in charge. Thorne clicked his mic off. He looked at his men, at Chun and Rodriguez, who were staring at him. Their expressions were no longer filled with admiration for their tough-as-nails sergeant. They were looking at him with something else. Pity. And they were looking toward the eastern ridge with pure, unadulterated reverence. The exfiltration was a tense, hurried affair. The QRF, a company of rangers, secured the valley while the two Chinooks swooped in. Maya remained in her hide until the last member of ODA 914 was on board their bird. Only then did she break down her position, pack her gear, and make her way down the treacherous rock face to the extraction point designated for her. She boarded the second helicopter with the Rangers, keeping herself separate. The flight back to FOB Nightingale was loud and vibrated with the energy of men coming down from an adrenaline high. Maya sat in the back, leaning against the cold metal fuselage, her eyes closed. She wasn't celebrating. She was decompressing, letting the hyper-focus of the engagement recede, allowing the quiet back into her mind. When they landed, Colonel Madsen was waiting on the tarmac. He wasn't looking at the helicopter carrying his green berets. He was watching hers. As she stepped off, he walked over, stopping a few feet in front of her. The Rangers gave them a wide berth, their faces a mixture of curiosity and awe. Madsen looked at her, really looked at her, for the first time. He saw the exhaustion etched around her eyes, the streaks of dust and sweat on her face. But he also saw the unshakable core of steel beneath it. "Lieutenant Sorensen," he began, his voice formal but stripped of its earlier condescension. "That was exceptional." "I was doing my job, sir," she said simply. "No," Madsen corrected her. "You did the job of an entire fire support base. I've read your full file now." The real 1-inch, he shook his head slightly. "I owe you an apology. And I owe you my men's lives." "No apology necessary, Colonel. Just get them the support they need. They're good soldiers." She didn't mention Thorne. She didn't need to. His punishment would be living with what he had done, with who he had threatened. She walked past him, heading for the barracks tent. As she approached, the men of ODA 914 were standing outside, cleaning their weapons under the harsh floodlights. They fell silent as she drew near. They stopped what they were doing and stood up, one by one. Thorne was there, his face haggard. He met her eyes, and for a moment, she saw the raw, agonizing conflict in them. He opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. He swallowed hard, his pride fighting a losing war with his shame. Then, he did the only thing he could. He brought his hand up in a slow, formal salute. It was a gesture of profound surrender, an admission of his colossal error, and a mark of ultimate respect. One by one, the rest of the team followed suit. Master Sergeant Diaz, young Private Chin, Rodriguez, all of them, standing at attention, saluting the woman they had mocked and dismissed just hours before. Maya stopped. She looked at their faces, seeing the gratitude, the awe, the shame. She didn't return the salute. In her world, such formalities were for parades. Respect was quieter than that. She gave them a single, small nod, an acknowledgement of their gesture, of the bridge that had just been built across a chasm of prejudice. Then she walked past them and into the empty tent. She dropped her pack by the cot, the heavy weight hitting the plywood floor with a solid thud. The exhaustion she had been holding at bay washed over her, a heavy tide. But there was one last ritual to perform. She unzipped the case and took out her rifle. She laid her poncho liner on the floor and began to break it down. The motions were slow, deliberate, a form of prayer. She cleaned the bolt carrier group, wiping away the carbon and grit of the battle. She ran a patch through the barrel until it came out clean, the rifling shining under the dim tent light. She cleaned the scope, her thumb gently polishing the lens that had been her eye on the world, her instrument of judgment. Each piece was an extension of her. The cold steel, the precisely machined parts, the delicate glass. They were tools, but they were more than that. They were a part of the covenant she had made with herself long ago, to be still, to be silent, to be lethal, to be the unseen force that watches over those in the fight. Master Sergeant Diaz appeared at the entrance of the tent, holding 2 steaming mugs. He walked over quietly and set one down on the floor beside her. It was coffee, black and strong. "The men wanted to thank you," he said, his voice low. "They're processing. Thorne most of all. I don't think I've ever seen him broken like that." Maya didn't look up from her work, her hands moving with practiced grace as she reassembled the trigger mechanism. "He's a good NCO. He loves his men. That's why he was afraid." Diaz considered this. Maybe. Fear makes people do stupid things. Pride makes them double down. He took a sip of his coffee. "That call sign. Nyx, the Greek goddess of the night, right? The one even Zeus was afraid of." Maya finally looked up, a ghost of a smile touching her lips for the first time. "It's just a name, Master Sergeant." "Is it?" he asked softly. He watched her for another moment as she finished reassembling her rifle, the final click of the bolt seating home echoing with soft finality in the quiet tent. "The Colonel is arranging your transport back to Bagram. Private flight. Seems Task Force Command wants a word." "They always do," she said. Diaz nodded. He finished his coffee and placed the empty mug down. "Well, for what it's worth. It was an honor to share a battlefield with you, Lieutenant." He turned and left without another word. Maya sat there for a long time, the rifle resting across her lap. The silence of the tent was a comfort. Outside, the sounds of the base were beginning to stir as a new day approached. She picked up the mug of coffee Diaz had left. It was still warm. She took a sip, the bitter heat a welcome shock. She stood up and walked to the tent flap, pushing it aside. The first hints of dawn were breaking over the distant, black mountains. A sliver of pale gold light cut through the deep indigo of the sky. The air was cool, clean. The dust had finally settled. She stood and watched the sunrise, a solitary figure cloaked in shadow, her duty done. The night was over. Her watch was ended. For now.